All right. Welcome to Fiona's Workshop. Today's going to be another experimental day where I work on things to see how well they work, if they can be incorporated into some sculpture work. If you recall, last time we did this giant ass leaf. So a couple of the things I'm going to do today is another leaf like this. But before foiling it, I'm actually going to put it in the kiln to see how that affects the edges, see how that affects the grinded parts in the middle. So that's one of the things I'm going to do. The other things I'm going to do is get a leaf roughly this size, and see if this sort of mounting size on the back of that leaf, if that will be strong enough. And then I think the last thing we'll do today, which we can just do it on this piece really, is I'm gonna see if I can do my foiling technique on a flat surface, i.e. this technique right here. So if I were to do that, I would put cuts at an angle like this and like this. Maybe not that far apart. Let's do like here and here. And then I'll foil out to like there and there and see if it holds pretty well, pretty decently. So let me get a piece of glass. I'm gonna use this same yellow. It's just kind of using it as my test glass. I don't want to say it's a throwaway piece, but I don't know. It's not my favorite yellow. It's not terrible, but I don't necessarily love it. So I'll just use this piece. Let's move on over to the cutting station. Further over. There we go. Oh yeah. Gotta put on my apron. Come on. Being silly. Alright. Can't do stained glass without my apron, right? I mean, you can, but... Alright, let's move some of this stuff out of the way. Make sure this has ample water in it. Not need to cut this, but I will grind it a bit just to take off any rough edges. You need to cut this guy down. Oops. Around it. There we go. Little leaf. That piece. This piece. This big old boy. Okay. Now I should probably be a little bit more precise with this, but because it's a test, I'm not really concerned about precision because it's a test piece. Let's see here. Turn this down somehow. One thing I do need to make sure is that the flat side is flat and that it's roughly the same size. Less concerned about precision on either side, more concerned about it's even length, I should say. Okay, so I'll definitely need to trim off that little butt, and then other than that, for the most part, it's relatively flat. Alright, let's do some grinding. Just grinding off the rough edges on the guy. Alright, there's a rough leaf shape. Yeah, it's not exactly flat. It's got a little bit of a curve at the end. Okay, that middle part of the left piece of glass I need to take down because otherwise it's... Well... I'll take it down a little bit. It's a little better. Kind of even up the profile a little bit. Okay, for the most part, you can call that what it is, which is okay. Alright, since I'm already here, let's put in all the little pieces I need. Got water, everything's cool. Alright, so this flat one, like I was saying, I'm going to do relatively close, 2 angled. Yeah, 2 angled out this way. No, angled in, kind of pinching like a claw. Okay, one's more angled than the other. I don't know if you can see that. It's pretty bright, huh? One's more angled than the other, but it should work. Alright, now for this guy. Okay. Now if you don't know what I'm doing, I'm putting in these notches so that I can put foil in them so that when it solders, it has a little bit of a bite. So that way I don't have to foil the entire thing. So this piece, I'm just seeing, you know, how does it look? How does it feel if it's, you know, a leaf that's roughly this size, that's only held on by the end. I wonder why. My wife has just informed me that the color is washed out. Let me try and fix that. It wasn't in the beginning. I wonder if it's just if I put my hand up here. There it goes. Nope. Rewash and back out, huh? Something that it's focusing on is changing its light. See, like there it goes.
Right.
So I guess these two pieces were reflecting light into it. Interesting. Those two. Okay. Now onto these culprits of our lighting issue. Put in oh wait, one of the other things I want to test before I put those in is I'm actually going to grind these edges at like a bevel, at an angle. Oh, there it goes again. Can I move that? Wow, that's really fascinating. Okay, I will not lay these flat, but so yeah, I'm going to grind these edges at an angle, and then when I put it in the kiln, see what that does. Maybe I'll do one on an angle and one not, see which one I like more on the same leaf. Essentially, I'm just putting in a bevel on this glass. The idea is I want the edge of the glass to kind of naturally come to an end instead of having this 90-degree right angle sort of situation. Apologies for the lighting. That should resolve itself once I move some stuff. I don't know. I'll move that guy over there. This thing, I move that thing over there. There it goes. Interesting. Anyway, on with the bevel. You probably can't see it very well, but I've essentially made a very dull knife edge, a bevel on this piece of glass. And once I put it in the kiln, I'm interested to see how the kiln or how the glass takes the heat when there's a bevel on it like that. All right, back to where I was before I remembered to do that. Essentially, if it doesn't make a difference, then there's no point in doing it, right? If it does, it's fascinating, right? All right, so unlike the other one, I'm gonna offset. So we'll do like one here, one there, There. Something like that. Okay, let's get the water out. I found the slower the setting, the better, because it prevents breaking out on the back. So I'm going to try and go fairly slow. Only set it to about half speed. Okay, first one's done. Oh yeah, it totally is just this glass. Wonder if there's a setting I can change that changes the way the camera works, but I won't fiddle with that for now. Not perfectly following the line I made, but happens. Creating such a watery mess. Okay, last one on this leaf. Wow, it's a totally different angle than the other two. Whoops. It's okay. Test piece, test piece. Okay. See how the back did on these. Can't blow it out at all. Do you have any blowouts? Doesn't look like it. Looks like 2 speed is pretty good. Pretty good. Okay. I don't know if you can All right, on to the next one. I'm actually gonna cut it this way because it's a nice angle for my hand. Really bad at following the lines I made. Okay. First one done. Second one done. Don't see any blowouts. It's got glass paste. Last one. I gotta be really careful with them. This one is the closest to the edge. It will probably be the smallest. Okay, that's all I'm going to do on that guy. Alright. I think our grinding is done for the day. Let me clean up a little bit. Bring the vacuum out. All right, let's move back over here. Hopefully we have less lighting issues over here. Okay. All So we did last week. I'm going to set this aside. Here are the pieces we're working with. Let's dry them all off. Like I said, there's this guy. Kind of see those little notches in there. That today. This guy as well. A couple notches. And then these guys. Now, what are the worries I have for these guys in the kiln? Well, first and foremost, I'm worried they're going to break. I've put in stress points and glass, heats up and cools down the way it does. And if it decides that one of those stress points is too much, it could just easily break along one of these lines. So that's what I'm, number one, worried about. Number two, I'm worried that as I melt it, it might distort in such a way that these grooves I made no longer work. But that's up to me to make sure that I put it in the kiln properly. And then the last thing is not necessarily a worry, but just a interest. Like, how does this beveled edge compare when it's put in the kiln? What would be interesting is if it's very nice, then it might be like even flat pieces I might put in the kiln with a bevel, as long as they're gonna have a natural edge. This is here. Can you see that? See how there's like a line of kind of fuzzy white compared to this guy? That's that beveled edge. Okay. Still sit okay, I guess. Not great, but what are you gonna do? Test pieces. Just testing things. I'm not trying to make perfect pieces. All right, let's fire up the old kiln. Let's see here. Can we get a nice shot of the kiln? And get a nice shot of the dirty floor that my dog likes to chew things on. Okay, let's move the laptop out of the way. Can you see anything here? Is the light too bad? All right. So in the past, I've been using these little small pieces of clay molding. Now for these leaves, I do want to give them a slight curve. The idea that I'm going to go for is this outer part I kind of want curled up. So I'm going to set these on the base and then let a couple of these in there, some of the shallow ones. Shallow one. Now, because these are multiple different pieces, the edge is going to have a wave to it because it's just going to conform to whatever I'm giving it. I think that's okay. In the future, if I want to do this sort of stuff, I would definitely make a clay mold that it can rest on. Actually, I made some earlier. Let me see if they're done drying. I don't trust that they're dry enough to put it in the kiln. If I were to put them in the kiln right now, they would literally explode. The water inside the clay would evaporate at a rate such that the exterior would go bye-bye. And I know this because I've done this. All right, so we're just gonna have kind of a wavy edges. One of the things I'm making sure is that the flat edges where these are supposed to meet won't change too much, if that makes sense. So I want that line where they meet to be as similar as possible, because if they warp at all, it's going to make trying to foil it very difficult. So that's one of the worries I had, right? Was that doing this would make it such that you couldn't foil it anymore. All right. I'm just going to give this a go like this. I'm going to put it for the shorter range, so like 12.5 minutes. It don't shut all the way. This little piece. Maybe if I just put 4 pieces. Okay, we'll see. Flatter piece than that. Okay. We'll see how this does. The straight edge is on the bottom of the kiln, so that shouldn't move at all. The only things that should be moving are on the outside edges of the leaf. We'll see if that works the way that I have intended it. Let me get this back in its tiny hole. Turn this on for 12 to 13 minutes and let that go. All right, let's go back down here. It's always challenging to get the angle just right. All right, that should work. Okay, so the last little bit that I'm gonna do today, like I said, a fairly short stream, is these little pieces. So first things first, let's try and clean this out as best as we can. Any dust that's in there is gonna prevent the tape from adhering, which isn't the biggest issue if you're going all the way around the glass. It's obviously not ideal, but it's not the biggest issue if you're going all the way around the glass, because it kind of keeps itself solid. But when I'm only doing a small piece like this, if the tape's not adhered well, it just makes things a little more difficult. So I'm just trying to, especially in the grooves, trying to get out any dust that may have been in there. Okay, we're going to use the thick foil. Go this flat piece first. Okay. Now we learned from last time, the last thing we want to do is break the foil, cut the foil. We want to shove it in there without cutting. So I'm not going to use the sharp edge, I'm going to use this flat edge on the side to just ever so gently coax it into that channel. Same on the other end. Ever so gently coax it in. Make sure the other side stays put. I'm going to pull from the outside of the foil instead of the inside, because if I pull from the inside, then it's directly pulling off of the other section. But the outside we have excess, because I'm going to trim it down. So I want to pull from the outside to make sure that I'm not causing any issues. I'm just flattening this down. May have heard a crack. I don't know if you just heard that. I may have heard a crack. It's very possible with the angles that those flowers were going, or that leaf was going, that it was putting tension or putting weight on one of the small joints, and as it cooled, moved, it cracked. Possible, we'll see. At the end of this 12 minutes, I'll pop it open real fast just to see what we've got going on inside. So I'm just trying to get this as adhered to the glass as possible. This is just a very dull piece of wood. It's actually meant for clay, but I found it works brilliantly for this, to just push down the foil without breaking it. Okay. Okay. You see how that foil kind of goes into the grooves? Now I'm just going to trim off the excess on the sides here. And then when we solder this, the solder should flow into those grooves as well with the foil, solidifying it and giving it a material connection bond that should, in theory, hold. But so I'm working on this today is I am testing that theory. Since this works, it does open up possibilities, right? Because this sort of system I know works, and that opens up the possibilities of petals, flowers, whatever. So it's on a curve, and then you kind of go with the curve. Actually, I didn't quite do this all the way around perfectly. I wonder if I should have gone... Either way. For another small crack. We'll just have to wait and see if those pieces of glass are broken. And if they are, I think the main takeaway, and the thing I'd want to try next time, is having a better clay mold for the glass to rest upon. I wasn't the happiest with these ones. It just provided a lot of instability, a lot of, like, there were two mounds, and so like in between here was a huge gap for the glass to fall into, which I think gives the glass plenty of opportunity to break. And the last thing we want to do is give it an opportunity to break. Often it will take that opportunity. One of the other things I could do is heat the glass first as a solid piece, get it, melted, bent, everything, and then take a grinder to it and grind in those channels. That's another possibility. I'm trying it out this way today because if I can grind it first, it might help if there's like any blowouts or any like large chunks of glass that are missing. It might help smooth it down, thus making it easier for the foil tape to stick. last time. Gently, ever so gently. This time I'm working from one edge to the next instead of working from the middle out. Let's see if I like that better. If I were to push too hard like this, there's a chance that the edge of the glass would actually cut the copper foil. And if there's a cut, that makes the solder not stick as well because it's being exposed to pure glass instead of the copper. It's like, for instance, if I were to keep this as a two-dimensional leaf, I think I would want to fire it to help soften the corners all the way down and around. Because if it's not, well, if two-dimensional leaf with only this edge foiled, if you foil the entire thing, it's not a problem. In fact, you kind of want these corners being sharp, because that provides a better grasp for the foil. But if I'm doing only this section, then either beveling this or putting it in the kiln so that it rounds it off might be a good idea. Like the other one, I am going to trim this down because I want to see how little I can get away with, right? Like how small of a connection can I have? Because obviously I could do the whole thing, and that's what most stained glass is. The entire thing is covered, but how small can I go with it still being usable? Without it losing too much of its integrity, structural integrity, that is. Make sure that's a nice line going across the back here. Okay. Ding. All right, I'm gonna wait a little bit, let it cool down before I introduce cold air. I'll look at it at the end. Just till then, pray that it's still good. I don't know. All right. Let's bring the soldering iron back out. Unplug kiln. Plugged in anymore. Plug in the soldering iron, let it start heating up as I get to fluxing. Let's get that cord out of the way as much as we can. I don't have a lot to flux here. It's just this, and then just use this little piece of copper, cut myself another little piece of copper, just to mount these. So we will need to flux the copper. So let's clean the copper. Basically just a sandpaper. Cleaning off the outside of the copper so it takes the flux a little better, and therefore it takes the solder a little better. Okay. I'm gonna put a first layer of flux on here, but then I'll flux it again when it's time to adhere it, but it just kind of rests in that flux. So one thing I did struggle with early on, were these pure copper wires actually adhering to the copper foot. And I just found that the better I cleaned it and the better flux, more flux I should say, that I used, the better it did. Alright, let's get in for a close-up, huh? There we go. Move all these things out of the way that we don't need. Get a little bit of solder on the end of my trying to fill that gap. See how there's still, you can still see indentations? You want to make it so that you can't see those indentations anymore. And that means that gap is full of solder, as strong as it can be. So I could have done a better job on this side, especially getting the foil all the way down and in. But what should do for now. Well, that was a terrible job of foiling that I did. Ideally, when I'm done foiling, I want it to be such that you can't even tell that there are notches in it, right? So that comes down to the depth of the notch that I cut. That comes down to foiling it very well. Right. By well, I mean just, you can kind of see how there's a couple little bumps, especially on this side. You can see it has like almost a zigzag pattern, just because the foil didn't sit properly on here. Which will definitely be telling if it works, then that means it doesn't need to be a perfect foil job. And like if I do a perfect foiling job, then there's no concern. And if it doesn't work, well, then I might have to do it again. Which would be a bit of a bummer, but it's okay. Let's get our helping hands. Yeah, let's do this at an angle. Why not? I'm gonna do some more flux. I know it's an excessive amount of flux, but the solder I'm using currently, it's needed. I'm gonna try some different solder maybe next week or the week after. I'm waiting on some new glass to come in, and then I'll start another big project. for now, use what I got. Else. Not even a glass of wood. How dare it? One of those instances of little piece of wood that's sticking up over here. It's trying to poke me. Instance of heating up the whole. Oh, yeah, that's hot. Heating up the whole joint heats up that copper. Copper takes heat very well, as you could just tell when I touched it, and so it will just melt the rest of the joint if you leave it. If you leave the heat on it, I should say. Okay, like the last one, do that in an angle. Again, a little piece of like wood that's sticking up over here. That's just like saying hi every time I set my hand down. It's like, hey, don't forget about me. I can't find it otherwise. Strange. Part of the reason why you see me getting a dab hot already before touching it to the piece. I think that can be adhered a little better. Go a little higher up on the copper. Just not fully confident in that bond. Call it there. Okay, let's clean up a little bit. It's only gonna be an hour-long stream. That's okay. Get up the soldering iron a bit, unplug it so it can cool. Move these things back to their intended locations. Is this guy cool down? Yes. You can see here, I'm actually pulling pretty hard. That's not coming off. That's awesome. Now it does, can you see that wiggle now? Going this direction is good. Back and forth this way, it now has wiggle room, it's got play, and I could probably wiggle it out. Maybe not. It's just interesting that it's got play. So this is that clamp going around, holding it in. It's now, the tape's released, but that clamp is still there. So it's loose, but still attached. Interesting. What about this guy? Can you pull? Yeah. It's pulling pretty hard and it didn't come off. But due to that pull, like the last one, it's now got some wiggle. There it goes. Now that's probably because I pulled it at such an angle that this notch, it was pulling perfectly out of that notch, if that makes sense. I was doing these notches at angles in, so that when you pulled in certain directions, there was always an angle where you're pulling it against solder. But with this, pulling it this direction, it's putting pressure such that you can pull it straight out without having to go against any solder. Fascinating. Look at that. I can put it back in and it holds for a bit. For a bit. Okay. So, what do we learn? Maybe this is on this sort of, well, so if I were to do the same thing here, pull that way. See how that worked? I was going the direct direction such that this could pull straight out without having to go against any physical resistance. Probably like sneak this back in, it would hold. Even still has some decent holding pressure. Okay, I think I've taken it to its extent. All right, so that works. And I was putting a decent amount of tension pulling this way. Like 5 to 10 pounds of pressure, I would say. And it was still able to hold. It loosened it. It definitely took away the integrity of the bond, but it held. What I like as well is that it came off of the glass first before coming off of this joint, which is nice, which means it adhered to the copper very well. That solder, that cleaning of the copper worked. All right, that was that interesting experiment. Now let's go check on how this did. All right, I'm going to give you a rare look this way, because I don't want to open it too far. Look at that. There's no breakage in there. That's awesome. That's everything I could have hoped for. Like I said, I didn't want to open it too far because if I let in too much cold air, it will prematurely cool the glass, which means it makes it prone to break. So the crunching I heard must have just been the clay, the outside of the furnace, kind of just figuring itself out as the temperature came up to heat. Must have been what it was. Alrighty. Well, thank you for joining me on these experiments. I think all in all, I'd call these experiments a success. I definitely think I can make a leaf. Uh-oh. I don't know if you heard that crack, but that might have been the glass. And that would, if it was the glass, that was because I opened it and let in cool air. So I'm not going to open it again. I'm just going to let it do its thing, come back down in an hour or two and check it. And just kind of pray that it's not actually broken. But like I was saying, back to this, I definitely can do a leaf this size with only a connection like we had here. I think I'd do it slightly different. I might make it a little bit bigger. Bring it out to like here is an angle and then here is an angle. And then cut the foil off there and there. So it has a little bit more grabbing, but more importantly, it's going around the curve of the glass more. Because as it was here, it barely came around the curve of the glass. But this way, it has more of a C shape, which means that the cuts in would be more of a clamp. Have better grip. On this guy, I also think it's something that's possible. But I think this is probably the weakest connection that we would have, is this straight edge connection. Probably the weakest of them, but it would still, I think, work. I mean, I'm just hearing cracks and stuff, and I don't know if that's things settling or the glass cracking, and it's very nerve-wracking. Yeah, so this is the weakest of the connections, but I think it would still work. I think ideally, if I were to do it like a piece like this somehow, I would try and get this corner so that I could put notches in like this, right? And then foil to there and there. Oh yeah, that's the glass cracking for sure. That glass didn't survive. I shouldn't have opened it, but I wanted to see. That's what I get for not being patient. All right. Yeah, if I were to do this piece, I would try and get on a corner like this. That's all I got for today. Thanks for joining me. I'll show you next time if this glass survived the process. At this point, I'm giving it more likely it did not. But you never know. We'll see. See you next time. Goodbye.